So
Yeah, awesome. So really, I'm just super excited to talk about, MFA at clients. When I typically talk to my MSPs, cybersecurity insurance is brought up all the time. All
yep.
the time. I remember reading one article about Travelers Insurance, how they actually denied a cybersecurity insurance claim because the MSP and the end user in this example, they checked the box on their form saying, yeah, we have MFA enabled. And yeah, they did. They had MFA enabled just on their firewall, but in reality, they lied on their form because the form needed to have MFA enabled everywhere. And in this example that Travelers Insurance used in their claim, and the reason why they denied it is because MFA was not enabled on the server level. So
Sure.
that's why I always advise MSPs, if you're going to enable an MFA, do it everywhere. Do it for all users across your endpoints, whether they're workstations or laptops, your firewalls, your VPNs, as well as your web applications like Office 365, Google Apps, for sure.
We do quite a bit with cyber liability insurance. And one of the things that I noticed about most of them is it's in the way they write it, because they don't tell you, make sure it's everywhere. They say, do you use it? What they mean is, do you use it everywhere? But when you say, well, yeah, we kind of use it, so I guess the answer is yes, but it's really a yes with an asterisk beside it, because there are certain things, whether it's, and I think a lot of MSPs struggle with the idea of, how do I do that on an endpoint? Like, how do I protect the workstation user, and how do I protect the server? Because that's not as common of a practice in MSPs, especially those MSPs that are attempting to become more secure. So it's like, oh my gosh, yes, I can put MFA on Microsoft 365, but I am lost as to how do I do that and enforce that on a workstation that's a work group that's sitting out in the middle of a work field. Like, how do I do that? So that does create some complexities. And like, where do MSPs, like, what's the way around that? Like, how do you get it everywhere?
Yeah, well, I know in our example for our company, we have a software agent that gets installed onto those target machines, whether it's Windows or Mac. It can get rolled out using a script through the RMM tool. And once
Okay.
it's installed, now you're going to have MFA enabled on that endpoint level. And all the users are going to be synced from their directory service, whether that MSP or that customer is using Azure AD, on-prem AD, Google Workplace. Once
Sure.
that directory service is synced, we now know who should be logging into that laptop. Is Mary from marketing supposed to be logging into the laptop? All right, great. We validated her username and password. Now the last step before she actually logs into that laptop is, let's send her an MFA code that she has to approve. That way we can verify that Mary from marketing is really indeed Mary from marketing.
Well, when we talk about MFA, there's so many different options of MFA, right? And it's crazy. Microsoft will allow you to have a number of things, from SMS all the way down to a certificate on a workstation that would be somewhat of the phishing resistant version of MFA. Like, how do MSPs get to understand, like, where do they go to build a, like, understand the processes for which make those more and less secure? Because they're not all that secure, but yet MSPs just think, well, I mean, it's SMS and it's available, so why not just use that? It's simple.
Yeah, I always discourage. Well, even SMS based MFA is better than no MFA. So step one, get
Sure.
some MFA. But if
Mhm.
you're going to do MFA, I wouldn't suggest doing an SMS based MFA, just because your SIM card can be hijacked very easily. All it takes is an imposter or some social engineering to call up your cell phone carrier and saying, hey, yep, this is Nick. I'm changing my phone. I need a new SIM card. Can you port it over the number to this new phone? And all the hackers need is some easily gettable information. What high
Yeah.
school did you go to? What's your mom's name? So spend 5 minutes on LinkedIn or Facebook. You don't even need to go onto the dark web, and it's very easy for your cell phone number to get compromised. That's why I always recommend MSPs that are enabling MFA to not use a solution that supports SMS-based MFA, and instead use things like push-based notifications on phones that are tied within an app, or things like hardware tokens, FIDO, YubiKeys, things of that nature.
Yeah. So my partner the other day put something on social media, and he said, just remember, it's essentially just remember these questions that people ask in these little games that are on Facebook. You click the button and it asks you these silly questions. You never know if those people are getting that information as an attempt to take that information and put it into something else where it says, well, what is your, what was your mascot in high school, or what was your, what was your nickname when you were a kid? And
I
all
am
these
not
other
telling you
questions.
my favorite soda. I am not telling you my favorite soda. No.
Uh, so for those who do use SMS, like, is this something that's emergent that they need to stop now and start figuring a different way? What if it's someone that, we have some situations where we have people that are in the field and they're blue collar workers, and they don't really like phones, and they don't like technology, and they don't want to deal with Authenticator, or they don't want to deal with some other third party app to manage that. And they're just saying, I just want to send me a text message. And just, how do you get through that?
Listen, when you're locking your house, you're locking the front door, you're locking the garage, you're closing and locking your windows, right? You're securing your entire perimeter, and that's the same type of thing when it comes to deploying MFA for all of users in an organization. You can't just give out MFA for the CEO and the CFO, but all right, the guys that are out in the field, they don't need it, because all it takes is the hacker to go, all right, well, the front door's locked, the back door's locked, but look, this window's wide open. Let's go in through there and get into the house. So that's why you really need to have MFA enabled everywhere, not just for your own security, but in order to qualify for most compliances as well as most cybersecurity insurance policies nowadays.
What's your take on privileged access management? It's kind of a weird term that I think gets thrown around and sometimes used in ways it's really not. But like, what's your thought on that from an MSP perspective?
Yeah, so privileged access management is definitely up and coming in the MSP space. Currently, what a lot of MSPs typically are doing is, they're having their technicians share passwords, through a password manager or an IT documentation tool. So that level 1, level 2 tech, they'll connect to a client's endpoint through an RMM. When they need admin credentials to do something on the server, they're copying and pasting that admin credential out of the IT documentation tool, and now they're logged in the machine, good to go. The issue with that is you've now exposed that technician to the keys to the kingdom. So if that technician leaves, they're walking out the door with all the usernames and passwords, which means as an MSP business owner, you now have to go in and manually update and rotate all of those admin credentials that technician has seen and got access to. A couple of months ago, I was talking to an MSP, and this is terrible. He's actually delayed terminating one of his technicians because he knows how much of a pain it is to go back in and update and manually rotate all of those passwords that technician has seen across the 80 different customers. That's why, again, I would urge MSPs to deploy some sort of privileged access management tool, which really shields those admin credentials from the technicians ever seeing them to begin with.
So yes, I see this in the groups all the time, especially social media groups, where people say, hey, how are you all sharing MFA and user admin credentials? Of course, rule number one is you should never, it creates anonymity for those individuals that are using those. You don't actually know who made those changes because they're not individualized, but there's a bigger issue there. So how does privileged access management work to make that simpler or more simple?
Yeah, so it's basically giving the keys to the kingdom only to the persons that need it for a short amount of time, and giving it in a way where they actually never actually get exposed to that key. I know that in our example, what we do is we have technicians log in with their username, their password as a technician, and when they need admin access to a client's machine, a push notification will get sent to their phone. Hey, are you trying to log into this client server through New York City right now? Approve of it? Yep, that's absolutely me. And now they're in the session as an administrator. So the idea here with our privileged access management is that, technicians could still do what they got to do, but they're never exposed to sensitive information. They're never actually seeing that username, seeing that password. And as an added layer of security, that admin credential is going to get rotated automatically behind the scenes, in our example, at least.
Sure. So what's the difference in that and like identity and access management?
Yeah. So privileged access management is actually just a subset of identity and access management. Typically with identity and access management, the I stands for identity. And this really is what's going to stop criminals from coming in through the front door, which means MFA and SSO, verifying that users actually are who they say they are. A stands for access, which is really related to privileged access management, meaning that once you're inside the machine or the network, you really only have access to what you need to do. Where you're not getting access to a bunch of different things. You want to lock it down, sort of create more zero trust. That way, cyber criminals really can't make any lateral movements once they're on the network. All right, you don't want Mary from marketing to be an admin, because if she gets compromised, it's easier for criminals to gain access. And then the last sort of piece there with in identity and access management is really managing the users, managing the customers. And that's what we try to do here, is make it easy for MSPs to really manage all the identities across all their different end user customers that they might be selling IAM services to.
So if I needed access to one of my clients as an MSP, and I'm a staffer, I'm a tech or a network administrator or a server admin or Office 365 admin, whatever I am, and I need access to a particular tenant, these two solutions could be automated. Like, you could do something inside the solution that would then allow me to have a temporary level of access into
Correct.
that tenant, and then when it's done, it would either disable the account, pull the account, or something along those lines.
Correct. Yeah, we have granular role-based permissions that will say, "Hey, Craig could access client number 4's server at this point," and when he accesses it, he'll access it as an admin. But again, he's not seeing what that master admin password is. So if he ever left the MSP, there's no damage there. Another compromise of if you're sharing credentials is, say you're copying and pasting passwords out of an IT documentation tool. When you're pasting that password, that's a keystroke. That means if you have some sort of key logging software installed, or if a bad guy installs it, they're tracking those keystrokes. They now know what that username was and that password is. So it's easier for the bad guys to get that sort of credential and information.
What other types of solutions do you think? I don't know what the percentage is. I know there's a subset of MSPs that really are what we call break fix. They just they do hourly rate work. They may put antivirus on a system, and then you've got MSPs that are really just help desk support focused, and then you have the other subset of them who are really heavily ingrained into security first as a means of business. If they're doing PAM, they're doing the IAM, and they're also doing MFA and things like that. What else is big ticket items that are important for MSPs to ensure their clients have? Because you mentioned earlier cyber liability insurance, but like sometimes some of those are very, very extensive in the requirements. But what are those common things that you see that MSPs really need to use?
Yeah, so when I'm talking to MSPs, they're really not making cybersecurity services optional anymore. They're pretty much selling a cybersecurity stack, and all right, if you're my customer, you're using this, and that's it. So typically we're seeing, EDR, XDR services being deployed, whether it's SentinelOne or Bitdefender or Malwarebytes. There's a bunch out there. So you got your EDR to protect your endpoints. You got your email security to protect your inbox from phishing attacks, things of that nature. You got your backup and disaster recovery solutions to protect your local data, your cloud data. Security awareness training, obviously, to better secure your users. And then the last thing we're seeing typically in the mandatory stack is, MFA for sure. And usually when you have all these components, it's ultimately going to reduce your premiums and your cybersecurity insurance.
Yeah, we've noticed that I joke about it because I think it's kind of funny. Applications are these questionnaires. They're not questions. They're statements. They're reverse engineered to identify the amount of risk that to a client has, or I guess maybe a prospect to an insurance carrier has, based upon how they answer those questions. And even though they look like questions, if you've got 4 boxes, there's actually primary boxes that need to be checked, and anything outside of that is much either the premium goes up, the amount that you have to pay per incident goes up, or even the coverage goes up. Are you seeing any flexes in that? Are you seeing anyone that's like in the insurance space that's not asking for these things, or is it pretty consistent for you?
Yeah, it's been pretty consistent, and it's just getting more and more strict, especially for cybersecurity insurance. And that's why a lot of cybersecurity warranty companies are starting to pop up as well as an added layer beyond insurance. Like you see Cork just got established by Datto founder Austin. So, I see, in addition to cybersecurity insurance, more cyber warranty providers being popping up in the future as well.
Explain that. What is cyber warranty? What is a cyber warranty?
Yeah. So again, I'm not a cyber warranty person here, but my understanding is it's additional coverage that wouldn't be covered by cybersecurity insurance in the event of a compromise. So
Oh,
yeah, it's additional funding and payout really for customers that need it when they need it, as opposed to having to go through a lengthy 6 month review to get money from the cybersecurity insurance. Because when was the last time you got money from your insurance next day, right? Which
right,
is when you
right.
need it the most. It's usually, yeah, we'll maybe pay you something sometime if we can't find that you didn't check the right box or wrong box.
So I guess it's kind of like Aflac for cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and I know there's some of these solutions out there that are putting out, I guess you would say, sales material that says, "Hey, we have $1 million like Sentinel One. They have $1 million policy that on the backside that says if you're using our solution and use it the way we want you to use it, the way we tell you to use it, which is really tough.
Yeah.
But if you
It's
use it,
great that Sentinel One advertises $1 million policy. All right, raise your hand if you actually gotten that payout. Somebody
uh,
drop a comment. I want to see someone that says yes, we used it and we got the money. Like,
I have
yeah,
never heard anyone get it. And so I'm
yeah,
sure their stipulations are so tight, and maybe they've even written it like it's more self-energizing in the sense that, hey, the only way you can really do this is if you allow us to manage it and we control it or something like that. I don't really know, but uh, so what do you think the percentage of MSPs that are focused on cybersecurity? You think that's a pretty high amount, or do you think it's a pretty low amount?
I'd say it's still low, but it's growing. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, everybody was pretty much break fix and
Yeah,
adopting the MSP model. Now we're seeing a market change. People are going more from MSPs to more MSSPs, managed security service providers, where they're leading with cybersecurity first.
yeah.
Granted, the word MSSP can be different. I've had one man
Sure.
shops call themselves MSSPs. I've had 100-person organizations with their own internal 24/7, 365 SOC and a SIM platform call them an MSSP. So, again, take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I'm seeing definitely cybersecurity being the focus for a lot of IT providers going forward.
It does seem too that vendors are recognizing, I think the amount of money it takes to truly create what we would really consider to be an MSSP, whether it's staffing and space and technology, is so significant. I do see vendors attempting to fill that space with managing their own products. So whether it's Bitdefender, whether it's Sentinel One, whether it's the likes of ThreatLocker and things of the nature, which are offering a managed version of that solution, it seems like at least for many MSPs that they don't have a good grasp on it, there are easier ways to get into the industry or into that particular element, that space, than just staying in the break fix or the support, which
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge shortage of cybersecurity talent that's out there, and that's why there's a lot of great vendors that could help out smaller MSPs with their cybersecurity services. I know that ConnectWise has the Perch offering, which is SOC as a service for MSPs.
yep,
I worked at Scout Cybersecurity, which was an XDR SOC as a service vendor for MSPs for a number of years. Here at Evo, we use the great team over at Solutions Granted. Again,
yeah.
they are a master MSSP that offers SOC as a service for MSPs. So I know Kaseya also has Rocket Cyber. So there's definitely a lot of sources out there for smaller organizations that are short on staff that need that extra set of cybersecurity talent to watch over endpoints, email inboxes, Office 365 alerts, things of that nature on a 24/7, 365 basis.
How do you see CIS fitting in all this fun stuff for MSPs?
Yeah, so the CIS framework is definitely something that's on the rise that we see. One of the things that the CIS controls really talks about is uh, cracking down on sharing accounts. You really shouldn't be sharing accounts or sharing MFA codes, and that leads to the rise of privileged access management. That's why there's a lot more PAM vendors in the MSP market now than there were, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, nobody really knew what PAM was. Everybody was just like, oh yeah, I copy and paste my admin passwords out of IT Glue like everyone else. And fast forward 5 years, there's a whole bunch of vendors offering PAM for MSPs.
Which brings me to another point. It seems like every day another solution is coming out of the woodwork. Like another PAM, another whether it's an account management or whether it's some other type of security solution. Like, how do MSPs wade through the mass amount of companies that are just popping up like like a yard that hasn't been treated? There's just weeds everywhere. How does an MSP recognize that these are good solutions and this is worth it and they have a good back end, and whether it's SOC 2 compliance and things of that nature, but how do they wade through all of
Yeah,
that?
I think all MSPs need to do their due diligence when they're picking a new vendor, whether it's EDR, whether it's PAM or access management or someone else. Do your due diligence. Research that vendor. Research the competitors of that vendor. Take a call or a demo with that vendor's competitor. Research those vendors on the IT business groups on Facebook as well as Reddit.
Yeah.
Hey, has anybody ever heard of this vendor? There are a lot of new vendors here, and some of them are awesome. Roost is gaining a lot of traction. 10 years ago, ThreatLocker, Huntress, they weren't around, and now try to find an MSP that's not using either Huntress or ThreatLocker. So, definitely don't look past a new vendor. Just because they're new doesn't mean they're necessarily bad. They're just solving a problem that hasn't been solved before, and they're new to the curve, and that can be very, very awesome. So definitely do your due diligence. Don't take the vendor's word for granted. Definitely do your due diligence. Some sales reps on the phone are trained better than others. So do your due diligence.
That does seem to be a common element, the shifting, and I've seen some salespeople go from one organization to another and yet call us. And so it's like, wait, just a minute ago you were over here, and all of a sudden now you're over here, and now you're selling a completely different product. And where do you see blind spots for MSPs from a security perspective?
Ooh, blind spots for MSPs. That's definitely. I mean, I guess I would go back to my earlier point here of really having MFA enabled for all users everywhere. Whether you're using my product or my competitor's product, just please turn on MFA. Even Microsoft says that having MFA enabled will block 99.9% of account compromise. One simple action will block 99.9% of compromised. Okay? And MFA generally isn't that expensive. It's not like you're installing a multi-$1,000 BCDR appliance. It's generally a few bucks a user. And again, to block 99.9% of attacks, that's definitely an area to focus on for sure.
What would be the second? I'm going to make you dig a little bit deeper. What do you think the second thing that is a real blind spot for most or many of the MSPs? Maybe the ones specifically that you've spoken to about your own product, but
yeah, a lot of MSPs they're struggling with cybersecurity insurance. Because again, as an MSP, you guys are subject matter experts in technology, right? But you guys aren't lawyers. You're not used to getting a 25-page questionnaire with all these boxes to check out. That's why it's really important to really have a chief information officer or chief information security officer that really understands those boxes and make sure they're checking them right. If you're an MSP that can't afford to hire a full-time CIO or a CISIO, there's third-party services. You could get a virtual chief information security officer, a virtual CSIO. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I would recommend if there's a shortage of talent there.
Since specifically since we're talking about security, but there still is a lot of work to be done by MSPs when it comes to typical support and things of that nature. Do you ever hear much about that type of stuff anymore, or is it really the ramp up as people are starting to say, oh crap, security is really where it's at, and if I don't catch up, then
it's a mix of, security is important, but you also have to pick vendors that are willing to work with MSPs, even startup MSPs. Some of the enterprise players, I've heard it all the time from MSPs. Yeah, I called one of your competitors, Nick, and they were like, 3-year contract, 1,000 user minimum to get started, or they won't even take my phone. So make sure you reach out to MSPs that are really focused on the channel, that they don't have long-term contracts, they don't have large setup fees, they don't have large minimums. That way you could start up small and really grow and scale your business from there. Because whether you're an organization with 5,000 users or 5 users, you still need protection.
No, for sure. And I think there's some debates too, whether MSPs should complete the application on behalf of the client. However, and there are people that say, you create additional risk associated with that. But the reality of it is that if they're asking you, you're filling it out. If they're asking you the questions and you're answering it, if they get something wrong in the process of transitioning that data from verbal to a written form or to a digital form, there's space in there for error. And so, I like to tell people, look, I mean, obviously, you're saying that this is what we do based upon what we deliver, but this is, I can't limit it to anything outside of that. Or I do limit it to anything outside of that. This is what we deliver. This is what we check. And this is the box that we do, but you have to sign off on it. And the liability obviously stays with the company.
Yeah, well, one of the benefits of the MSPs getting involved with those cybersecurity insurance reviews with their customers is that's also an opportunity to upsell. Oh, the piece of paper says you need email security. Well, I could sell you XYZ as part of my package. It says you need email security or user security training. That's another service I could provide for you. So those cybersecurity insurance questions should be used as a sales sheet, in my opinion.
I totally agree. Actually, this is one of the parting comments I made when in the last podcast with Art was I said that we about 3 years ago, and people are starting to catch on now too. About 3 years ago, we reverse engineered 6 cyber liability insurance applications and set out to make sure that we can check most, if not all, of those boxes. And then that becomes a sales pitch by itself to say, look, we know cyber liability insurance is becoming harder and harder to get. So what we've done is we've washed those. We've brought all those down to one core element, and we are attempting to implement as much as we can to make sure that you have the best ability for the best price, the lowest retentions, and the highest payouts if there were ever an incident.
Smart.
Yeah. And hopefully other MSPs start to do that too. I mean, it's, there's enough for everyone out there. So I definitely want them to do that because that's really where you're headed anyway. And so if you tell people you're a cybersecurity firm, but yet you don't offer but 25% of the availability of the questions, like you can't check, but a couple on each page, but you have to ask yourself, are you really doing cybersecurity, or are you just doing enough to say that you can do cybersecurity?
Mm-hmm.
Any parting things that you have that MSPs need to know that we haven't discussed, or areas when it comes to just security in general or anything along those lines?
Please do not share your passwords. Please make sure that your passwords are, long and very hard to crack. Don't make your passwords 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like in Spaceballs. So have complex passwords. Do not share passwords. And if you get a little pop-up on your phone saying, hey, are you trying to log in from this place? Don't just press accept. Actually, only press accept if it's actually you.
Isn't it crazy the amount of people in our space that actually will do some of those things? Yet we always laugh at the ones that do it that are not in the MSP space.
Mm-hmm.
We make fun of them, but yet we do it ourselves. It is crazy. And I think that privileged access management and stuff of that nature is a big step towards that. I think to a lot of MSPs, I think it looks really big and overwhelming. And so I think that's why people shy away from it a lot. And I'm hopeful that shifts over time.
Yep. Agreed.
Appreciate you coming on. Really, really do. Hopefully we'll have you back on. We'll talk about some other things, but thanks for sharing your world on cybersecurity.